So before we officially get started, Scott, we do have a caller on here that is seeking a realtor familiar with the Ruston market. So you may be able to, we'll give your information out and if they want to call you. All right, let's go. I'm sorry?
That'd be great.
Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone for our Monday chamber chat with the Bossier Chamber of Commerce. I'm Lisa Johnson. I'm president of the Bossier Chamber of Commerce and excited to have today Scott Hughes, who is the CEO and Association Executive Director of the Northwest Louisiana Association of Realtors. And his bio starts off that he's a graduate of Centenary College of Louisiana with a BS degree in business administration, hey Misty, and an MBA from the Frost School of Business. But first, let me tell you what's most important is we went to high school together. Okay, so we are both Bossier Bearcats. We're both homegrown local folks, even though he's an Air Force transplant, but good friends. And so, Scott, I really appreciate you joining us today. So he has served on a number of the local board of directors, including the Boy Scouts of America, the YMCA, the United Way of Northwest Louisiana, and several area chambers of commerce. Scott received the Shreveport Chamber of Commerce Young Leader Award in 1999, was named Small Business Person of the Year in 2000, and was a graduate of the Cable Leadership Louisiana Program class of 2007. He serves as an on-air political analyst for KTBS TV, the Shreveport Market ABC affiliate. He was appointed to in 2010 by Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal to serve on the Louisiana State Civil Service Commission, where he has been elected vice chairman of the commission that helps manage and oversee 60,000 state employees. I think, Scott, that's your best kept secret for a lot of folks. When I first learned that some time ago, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. So, but it was in February 2014 that Scott was named the CEO and association executive for the Northwest Louisiana Association of Realtors, where he now works with the 1,200, so 1,200 members of the local residential and commercial real estate community. And he has earned many designations and has served for 3 years on the NAR Land Use, Property Rights, and Environment Committee. So he is the son of a retired Air Force officer and school teacher. And Scott grew up living around the country and the world, but now chooses to live in Shreveport with his wife and 2 children. So I'll turn it over to you, my fellow Bearcat, and our hopefully real estate expert for this area, to just kind of give us an update, Scott, on, how's the real estate been faring for during this COVID epidemic, and what can we see for the future? So I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to you. If you come across any questions for those that are participating, use the chat box to ask your questions, and we will get those answered for you at the end. And we'll just let you now, Scott, start your presentation. So Scott and Jessica, it's yours.
Well, Lisa, I appreciate the introduction. Always glad to be with the Bossier Chamber. I actually enjoyed serving on the Bossier Chamber board for a long time. It was one of the most dear parts of my community service, was to serve a number of years on the Bossier Chamber board. So I think I understand what your ask is. Lisa called me and said, could I give you some insights to the real estate market? How is this going to impact things? And so I have a few slides. I actually have some real numbers that we're going to get to that show you valuation, number of sales, et cetera. I will just generally open by saying I think we've been surprised. I think when this hit, a lot of people thought that with masks and with lockdowns that real estate would just absolutely collapse. And I want to be honest, it has collapsed in some parts of the country. There are some markets that are not doing very, very well. But much to our surprise, the local market has been very resilient. In fact, as you'll see when we get to the numbers, it has been amazing what the local real estate market has done here in Northwest Louisiana. And so I thought to get to the numbers and talk about the future, it might be important to put it in some context. And so I do want to just say up front, I do not have a broker's license. I am not an attorney. I run the business side for the association. I'm like Lisa. She doesn't run a business. She runs the business of businesses. And so I don't run a real estate firm. I kind of manage the services for all the real estate firms, the multi-listing service and their political action. So I am not in the market buying and selling every day. I do have the data of what goes on, and I do have the resource of my board of directors, one of whom is on the call today, Misty Ingersoll, and I have 17 other board directors, and I have hundreds of people that I speak to every day, and I look at the numbers. And so I thought that let's put this in context. When all this hit, what everyone is really looking at is, what's the future going to hold? What's the change? And we hate that word change. Change is scary. So I thought from a business perspective, let's look at perspective. And so, Jessica, if you go to the next slide, we've had change for a long time. And so from a business perspective, I looked back to 1950 as sort of one of the first major changes. In 1950, we had the suburbs. Cities had been downtown, they had been smaller. We came home from the war years, the GI Bill, and everything started exploding out. And we all know what that did to our local communities. For the city of Bossier, was tremendous. Bossier was a bedroom community. It has grown, Houghton, Benton, the growth out to those cities. And so I've got a couple slides here. What we had was suburbs, and we had cars. And that scared a lot of people in 1950 because they had their downtown business, they had apartments, everybody walked everywhere. It was a very controlled business environment. And yet overnight, we exploded in population, and we had the baby booms, and everything changed. And so what did business do? Business reacted. Business looked at that and said, okay, we need to set up satellite stores. We need to build new bank branches. We need to provide grocery stores and the services for all these people that are living farther out. And we just adapted over the next number of years as the suburbs grew out. And so, strip malls started coming up, and people started putting the services where the people lived. And that'll be a theme that you'll hear throughout my presentation. We delivered business services to where the people were. And when the suburbs came around, business adjusted. And so then we get kind of comfortable. Things start growing. We get into the 70s. The next slide. In the 70s, you saw significant business change as well. I remember moving to Shreveport Bossier. Lisa mentioned that my dad was military. We come here in '82. So in the 70s, 80s time period, we still had blue laws. Anybody remember blue laws? Blue laws said you couldn't open your business on Sunday. We used to roll the streets up at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. We had a way of doing business that was different than it is today. And somewhere along the 70s throughout the country, into the 80s, depending on where you were, we saw this change of blue laws. So what does that mean? That means business changed. Business, that was scary. We were all used to having that 8 to 5 job and going home and what all that meant, but we learned to change. And now business had to say, okay, we're going to staff up on weekends. We can be open on Sunday. Yes, liquor came in a little bit there with the blue laws, but the big deal was after having decades of the way we did things, we changed the way we did business. And I think you've seen the business react to that. Now we have the 24-hour day economy. Now you can do things that all started basically in the 70s or 80s. And again, business expanded by upping employment, by changing hours, and finding a way to take advantage of the change in blue laws. And so then we get into a period where I start to get really knowledgeable because I grew up in it, the 90s, the mall. And I still remember when Pierre Bossier Mall was built, I was actually on the opening staff of the AMC Theater that was in the mall. Used to love the mall. I grew up in the mall. And so you have here a picture of the Mall of America, the largest mall in the country, and then a shot I could find of Pierre Bossier Mall, which is everyone in Bossier knows was built after the tornado. We took advantage of that land. The mall was put together, and it became the retail hub in the 90s. And so, yeah, did the mall scare people? It terrified people, particularly mom and pop stores and businesses all over the community didn't understand how this new thing called malls were going to change everything. And I think over the 90s and into the 2000s, we learned malls can be good and bad. Malls brought us a lot of different things to our community, but it also forced businesses to change. The mall was providing, in many regards, the big box. The mall was providing specialty stores. And so what opportunity was there for the local guys? The local guys pretty much figured out, after about 4, 5, 10 years, some people enjoyed the mall, some people didn't like the mall. And if you think about Shreveport Bossier locally, South Park Mall was the first mall, followed by Pierre Bossier. South Park started to get into trouble. People didn't feel comfortable going in the mall. Later came St. Vincent and then Pierre Bossier. And over time, the popularity of malls started to wane. People didn't like going and walking around. They liked pulling up to their store. They liked having a specialty store. They liked having the service. They liked, and so local retailers learned to adapt. And the mall did not shut down everything else in the economy. Our local businesses learned to react. We did get some big box out of that, as the big box started to go out with the different pads all over town and build these mini malls, these walk-up stores. So then we get ahead with the mall. What took the mall down? The internet. And so we start getting into 2000, we start getting into 2010, my 20-year theme, and we really see the internet. And I've got 4 logos here, probably the 4 companies that may have changed, the world the most in this regard. Apple changed everything, and now they're an online store. Netflix changed how we got delivery of content and was very important on changing business models, what Netflix could do. And, of course, Google and Amazon basically dominate the retail space today, especially Amazon. And so starting in 2010, we started getting home delivery. We started seeing a different way that I didn't have to go out to get my product and my information would come to me. And the business application of that, as we look ahead to where we're headed, is, again, we learned and business learned. Business originally got afraid of these companies, but yet now most retailers today have a relationship with these companies that are on this screen, especially with Google and Amazon. Now you want to be a part of the marketplaces. Now you want to have figured out how you can do online delivery. And even local people in the Bossier community have figured out it doesn't matter if I'm selling specialty product or king cakes. I can sell my product from Shreveport, Bossier out to the world through the internet. Before I couldn't afford to advertise all over the world. Now, with a good web page, with a good marketing plan, I can develop a clientele and a following from all over the world for my product. But the internet came along, and it started to change the world. And so that's kind of where I think we were. When we ask where are we in 2020, this is where we are. We still were in this phase of the world moving to the internet. There was a futurist, a lady who predicts the future a number of years ago named Faith Popcorn, and she predicted the castling of America, that we would all build these homes and they would become our castles again, and we would no longer sit on our front porches and talk to our neighbors. We'd sit in our back courtyards, and we would have everything delivered to us. She predicted this 25 years ago, and I think we're there, people. That's really what's happened. And so when the COVID, you can switch slides, Jessica. So when the COVID comes along, to put it in context, that's where I think we were sitting in terms of real estate, in terms of homes, in terms of business services. We were sitting already kind of building our castles. Some of those castles are already behind walls in gated communities. We already were there as communities. So the next step, all that COVID really did when it came along, is it may have pushed us ahead 10 more years in this current cycle. The people who were reluctant to get online, the people who were reluctant to do Zoom meetings, the people who were reluctant to order clothing or certain things online, they still wanted to go to the store. Well, for 90 days, for 120 days, when you can't leave your house, when you can't go to a store, or even today, if you're an elderly person or have certain health conditions, you're still afraid to go into an environment that may not be healthy to you, online became your savior. And so what we saw was business adjusted. And we'll get to economics here in a second, but when this first happened, I remember someone calling me up, and we were talking about this, and I said, give business 45 days. You will be amazed what American business will do with 45 days. And so we started looking forward. I started saying, if you give business time, they will figure this out. They will figure out how to move us 10 years in 3 months in the online space. And that's really what happened, I think, where we are. So as we start to look forward, I just put down 4 points to talk about. Number one, the shape of the recovery. A little look at economics, because economics is always tied to real estate. Real estate's not going to do really great if economics aren't doing really great. New delivery systems. This is a chamber, so we'll talk a little bit about business, what I see how that may change, particularly commercial real estate, the value of location and buildings. I will talk about value of real estate. When we get to that bullet point, I have numbers for you. I'm going to show you the March, April, and May sales numbers for our market, and they may surprise you in several categories. And then finally, I'll close, and Lisa and I may talk a little bit about commercial places, adaptive reuse, because I think that's the real challenge as we move through the 2010s to 2020s into this new space. What do we do with the old buildings like we did before when we moved out of downtown to the suburbs, or when we had to go online or malls shut down? How do we look at that new space? So let's look at these four points pretty quick. I have an MBA, so I always like to look at things from a business perspective. And so a lot of my friends, I actually had lunch with one of my former college MBA instructors, and we had a great conversation over the shape of the recovery. What's it going to look like? And most of you are business people. You've probably thought about this. Is the recovery going to look like a W? Is it going to be constant up and down, is what they mean by that. Is the recovery going to be a U? Are we going to drop down and be down for a while and slowly come back up? Is it going to be a V? If you look, we came down hard. When the stock market came down, which is what I'm going to use as my predictor here, when the stock market dropped, is it going to shoot right back up really fast again? Okay? Most people I had talked to in my comments, we think it's going to be the Nike swoosh. And I borrow this without Nike's permission, so don't sue me, Nike. But the Nike swoosh, which we've all grown up and seen. And so I have over here on the slide to the right, that's today's Dow Jones. And that's today's Dow Jones market about 2 or 3 hours ago. And you'll see I have it set for the 6-month look. And I don't know about you, but it's kind of looking like a swoosh to me. We went down hard, and now the recovery is coming back up. And it doesn't look too jagged. It looks like it's going up at a pretty good little steady pace. Interestingly, if you follow the stock market, if you clicked on any of these other sub-buttons 3 months ago, 1 year ago, 2 years ago, they're all green. The only register right now that still has the stock market in a negative balance is the 3-month stock market. If I were to click on the 6-month, if I would have clicked on the 3-month, we're already back above where we were 3 months ago. If I clicked on 1 year or 2 years, the market's already shown a profit over the last 1 year or 2 years. So even though we had that hard decline when the economy shut down, we've seen some very good numbers. And I know there are some disputes on the job numbers from last Friday, but however you interpret the job numbers, they were better than we thought they were going to be. And so that was very good news for the economy. And this swoosh effect is, I think, something that if we look at real estate, if we look at investing in businesses, commercial businesses, that's good news for us. We may have a growth pattern we can start to invest in. It'll be different for every industry. Certainly hospitality, hotels, airlines, they might not have a swoosh. Their tail may be a lot longer before they see recovery on some of those industries. But a lot of your hardcore industries, manufacturing, housing, we've seen it come back if it dropped at all. So from an economic standpoint, things look good right now in terms of predicting the future. The next slide, new delivery systems. I looked at this and I talked to people because this is going to have a real impact on commercial real estate in our market. And this is one of those word puzzles where you see what people are talking about. And if you look at a lot of business things right now, that phrase in the middle, just-in-time delivery. Over the last decade in MBA schools around the country, we've talked a lot about just-in-time delivery. If you're in business, particularly a manufacturer, you know what I'm talking about. You're talking about not maintaining a warehouse full of supplies. You're talking about your supply chain is set to deliver pieces right when you need them, or 100 in, 100 out from your warehouse. You're keeping a constant supply of something. And so I think one thing we've seen with the COVID situation is we may back up in business and learn a little bit. Why did we not have toilet paper sitting in warehouses? It's a durable good. You know, if you back up to those previous times, the 50s, the 70s, the 90s, business always had durable goods stocked up. We don't do that anymore. We've taught business for so many years now to this just-in-time maximum profitability thing. But I think one of the takeaways is that we may need to get into warehousing a little bit more. The second big takeaway, when you look at some of the words in there, production, manufacturing, I think we learned as we came through this that delivery systems and critical things, medicine, pieces for machinery, we can't afford to have those made overseas anymore. That trade-off of getting the cheapest part made in a third world country because the labor cost, it didn't pay out for us when we had to have the part. It shut our economy down. And so, and I'll talk a little more in a second about adaptive reuse and communities, but one of the wins I think going forward we will see is we will see a lot of this manufacturing return to America. I think America, and if not America, NAFTA, Canada and Mexico. The NAFTA contract the agreement was just recently rewritten up in Washington, and it's very much more favorable to Mexico and Canada and the United States to do business here within the Mid-Americas. And so we may see production return home. We may see the need to have bigger warehousing space. And then obviously everything we've always talked about in Northwest Louisiana, being a transportation hub, being a distribution hub, plays in key to what we're looking down forward in terms of how new delivery systems may work. Okay, next slide. And then so starting to look forward, the value of real estate, kind of the core of what I think we want to talk about today. Two of the big things I've seen going forward, don't worry about the colors. Red is not threatening. I just wanted to stand out. But two big statements here. First of all, land. They're not making any more of it. It's kind of the old mantra about real estate. One reason real estate holds value, you always hear in times of trouble, people buy land and they buy gold because those have held value historically forever. And they are not making any more land. And what we're finding now is that the value of real estate over time continues to be an excellent investment. And so as companies, as people have looked at what they want to do in the future, land becomes a really valuable thing, especially if your land happens to be located near water, if you have a water source, if you have land to spread out. And that's the second point here. Smaller cities may be set to gain with cost of living and space. One of the things I think COVID exposed was for the last decade, the data was very, very clear. Everybody was congregating in the big cities on the coast. The big cities were seeing massive explosion in population. Some places were just growing faster than they could even grow. And many of these places didn't have land and they didn't have water. And they were struggling. California is out of water. Florida's out of land. And so you're running out of space and resources to keep these cities growing. And then COVID hit, and the entire thing about the city that people enjoyed, the density of it worked against people. The density in a pandemic was not a good thing. And so one of the things we're already starting to see in real estate is what we call secondary and tertiary, third-level cities could be big beneficiaries in this new world, because now people are starting to say all of a sudden, maybe living in a place where there's 26,000 people in a square mile might not be the safest place if something breaks out in a pandemic. Maybe having 100 acres on the lake and my own boathouse and everything may be a little more attractive than being piled into a high-rise in New York City or in Los Angeles. So I really think that when you look at these two, it kind of gives you a reason why some markets have done well and some have not. And as we'll suggest, a reason why Northwest Louisiana, especially Bossier City, with its assets, could be set to be very great. You have a lot of land in Bossier City still, and you have a water source. And I think that's very, very important going forward. So now to look at some actual real data. And I'll let this slide just stay up for a while and kind of let you look at it. But and there are better ways to present this data, but on a PowerPoint, I was struggling how to do this. So I'll kind of walk you through it. Down the left column, you have the March sold, you have March sold, and you have March valuation. And then if you read across the columns, the first real column is 2019. What happened in 2019 for residential? What happened in 2020 for residential? And then the two columns on the right are for commercial. So we'll look at the residential. And I will say up front to my business friends, most commercial property doesn't sell on the open market. It's not listed on a multi-listing service. A lot of commercial deals are private or they're leasing deals. And so the terms of those are never fully disclosed. So what I'm showing you here are those commercial deals that were on the multi-listing service that are publicly available. There's a lot more commercial that takes place behind the scenes that they don't publish their lease rates. But the residential is different. We have more than probably 95% of all residential listings. We can give you a pretty good insight to that. I think I heard someone ask a question.
It was me, Scott. It's Lisa. I just want to remind you that there are a couple of callers that are on the telephone only that may not be able to see the chart. Okay. So as you're going through it and explaining it, for those that are watching, you might get a little more detail than you need, but I want to make sure those that are on the phone call understand what you're talking about as well. And then we will also have this on our YouTube channel tomorrow. So anyway, go ahead. My apologies.
Thank you, Lisa. And I will, for those on the phone call, try to give you a visual read on what I'm looking at. So you start looking at the chart that if you can see it's before you. And let's take March, the month everything hit, okay? It started kind of in February, but it's really second week of March, third week of March. I think March 13th was a Friday, became sort of the big day that schools closed and a bunch of things happened on March 13th. And so if we look at March, a year ago, we had 443 houses sell in Northwest Louisiana. Well, this March, we had 461 houses sold. And so that was our first alarm. We shut everything down. Those last 2 weeks in March, the first 2 weeks of the pandemic shut down, we kind of went cold turkey. Everybody ran for the hills. They hid. No one knew what was going on. We were still questioning, can I show a house? What can I do? And yet we still, as you see there, sold about 20 more houses than we sold a year ago. March 20 was more than March of 19. Now, obviously, the market was on fire at that time. The economy was on fire. And one thing we have to acknowledge, it does take sometimes a few weeks for a real estate deal to fully work its way out. So these were a lot of deals in the pipelines, but we didn't see people run and hide. We saw closings happen. We saw people take possession of property. And what I'll point out, the second line on the chart is, a year ago, the average sales price in March was $169,000. This year, the average sales price was $189,000. So you're looking at $20,000 more average sales price over 461 transactions. That's a lot of money. That's showing you the valuation of what is moving in terms of the marketplace. To go on down the chart, we looked at the numbers in April. Well, April, we were in COVID the entire time. April's probably the best closeout month we had. In May, we start to open up a little bit, but in April, we were closed the entire month. But yet, real estate could happen. People did virtual. Our people learned. We talked about the learning curve. Our people learned they could do virtual open houses. They could do virtual closings. I want to thank the Chamber and some others. They helped us get remote title. We could sign title and do legal things online. And so we managed to keep doing business. And you'll see in April, a year ago in April, we did 454 transactions. This year in April, we did 420 transactions. So yes, we were technically down a few transactions, but I'll also say last year was a pretty high water mark for sales in the region as well. So we're looking at high numbers in 19 to begin with, and we were only within 30 transactions, about 8% off in a month that we really were shut down. The average sales price even went up. Last year in 19, the average sales price was $179,600. This year it was $183,000. So we're still seeing that rise in valuation. It wasn't like people were buying things on sale. It wasn't like a fire sale for houses because I got to sell my property. We still saw very solid valuations. And in a second, I'm going to show you Bossier Parish. And you talk about solid valuations, we'll look at Bossier Parish. And so we still saw growth in the market even though things were kind of shutting down. Interestingly, one of the things my people told me was that as we changed, this concept of change, we still sold transactions. What really happened? People that were just looking, the people that look at the TV shows and just want to go to open houses and just want to go and look around, they disappeared because they weren't going to just look around. The people who were looking to buy were looking to buy. And I think I heard one of my members tell me that before, someone might look at an average of 8 or 9 houses before they decided to buy one. Now they were looking at 3. They were doing their research. They were honing it down. They were looking at the 2 or 3 they wanted, and they were being transferred here for Barksdale, or they had to buy something, and they were coming in, and many of them bought houses sight unseen. The technology on virtual tours, and I think, Lisa, we'll talk about this in a moment, the need for broadband, the need to be able to provide that to our consumer so we can have those services is vital because we sold houses because the Internet existed. Our people were able to do that. And finally in May, the month just ended, you will see that May a year ago we sold 511 homes. May this year we sold 424 homes. Again, statistically we're down a little bit. I will tell you that May of 19 number is almost a high water mark for sales in the last number of years in the local association. 511 is a lot of transactions. That was a busy year for us for multiple reasons. But you'll see the 424 we sold in May is more than the 420 we sold in April. And so real estate sales stayed strong. The only issue we had in May, and this is sort of a data anomaly, I have looked at it, last May the average price was $195,700. May is normally a really good month for sales. This year it was $176,600. I will suggest to you there was what we call a bulk sale that took place. Somebody sold a lot of rental property that is all down in the 10, 30, 20,000, 30,000. Like a bunch of property got transacted at a very low dollar, and this is an averaging deal if you understand math. If we take those out, the real value is going to be up where everything else was. But when you start putting in $10,000, $20,000 rental homes and a number of them transact, it takes a lot of $400,000 homes to offset those. And so we are down a little in the average transaction, but it doesn't concern us. We know why. And so you still see, even in May, when we still had problems with the COVID, we still sold 424. I don't have it on here, but at the end of May, we had over 900 pending transactions. And so that shows the pent-up demand that's been building up. There's 900 contracts ready to come on through the system, and that's very high. That's up several hundred over where we normally float on a pending situation. If you can see the chart on the right side, those right 2 columns, I do have some limited commercial activity, and you'll see in March of last year there were 6 officially sold properties on the MLS. This year we had 2. April we had 4. Last year we had 1. So we were kind of trending down, but surprisingly in May, we saw where last year we had 6 commercials, this year we had 12 commercial transactions. And look at that number. We had over $5 million of MLS commercial activity in the month of May. That's remarkable. As you'll see in a second, a lot of that did come from Bossier Parish. And so with the commercial, we haven't necessarily seen a rise or a fall. It's been kind of consistent. What matters is where people are buying that commercial. And so I don't know if you want to take any questions on this slide, Lisa, or want me to go to the Bossier Parish slide. Okay, Jessica. Now, you see, for those that can see the slide, you see the exact same layout of information with just Bossier Parish. Now, this is all of Bossier Parish, not Bossier City. This is all of Bossier Parish activity. So what you'll see is in March of last year, 166 sales in Bossier Parish. In March of this year, 180. But look at the valuation. March of last year, 184,800. March of this year, 215,500. A lot of nice houses selling in Bossier Parish. In April of last year, 164. We did dip a little in Bossier, 157. That's a pretty close number statistically when you look at it. But look at the valuation. 211 last year in Bossier, 228 for the month of April in Bossier. And then you'll see, and actually that 511 is not correct. I apologize for that. That is that's a number I didn't change. But that number should be around 130 instead of 511. I'll change that slide, Lisa, and resend it to you. And the average price last year was around 228. And you'll see this year we had 141 sales in the month of May, strong for Bossier Parish. And the valuation did dip to 198, but a lot of those rental properties are right here. That's where you saw that valuation dip down. So we're not concerned about that. But interestingly, look over the commercial numbers, particularly Bossier Parish. Bossier last year had 2, 4, and 3 transactions in the different months, generally averaging several $100,000 each month. This year, you really didn't have a March or April transaction, but look at May. In the middle of the pandemic, there were 3 properties transactions in Bossier for over $4 million. And so people kind of feel that someone's investing in Bossier. And so I think if you look at these compared to the others, you can really start to see, I think, the value of real estate in Bossier Parish. Just to kind of, without going back, recap, this year the average retail value in the community is around $185,000. If you take all of Northwest Louisiana together, it's around $185,000. If you look at the valuations for just Bossier Parish, you are well in excess of $200,000, well, generally around $215,000, $220,000. So the average property in Bossier is selling for $30,000 or $40,000 more than the average property in Shreveport and the other surrounding areas. And so I don't know if you want to take any questions. I'll take any questions on this, Lisa, or you want to keep moving? Keep moving? Okay. So I guess we'll kind of go to my last slide, and then we'll have a conversation or do whatever you want to do. And so having looked at the numbers, having looked at where we are, I guess the big question that a lot of folks are going to have is, what does the future hold, especially for commercial places, adaptive reuse? What do we do as we possibly transition into a place where more and more people buy their goods online? More and more problem with empty spaces. And so I'm not recommending either of these. I just found them interesting. But if you can see the slides, the one on the left is people are starting to re-envision what office space may look like. How do you socially distance? How do you find an office space? Office space could be a problem, especially for big downtowns like Shreveport or Dallas and different places where you have high-rise buildings. And then even corporations are having to rethink. I think one of the challenges we're all going to have is when you send everybody home and you let them work in their house in pajamas and show up when they want to and have their flexible schedules, and you find out that you can still run your business, people may want to stay at home. And a lot of businesses might find out that they can be more effective, they can be more employee-friendly, and they might actually be more cost-effective to let people stay at home. So, but there are still businesses, there are still organizations that have a lot of value in the connectivity of teams and the putting the people together. And so we will see a reinvention of office space and how we do that. The picture on the right I find very interesting. It's one that I think our friends in Bossier may at some point be looking at, our friends all over the country. That is a mall. That is a mall where the mall has been shut down, and the adaptive reuse was housing. How can we come in and take a mall and effectively make it an apartment complex? And I think that's a challenge that many communities are going to face. And the larger the space, the malls, perhaps if you have an empty entertainment complex, you're going to have a challenge with huge complexes. The city of Shreveport has had the old Marketplace Shumpert facility sitting there for a long time, and they've looked at a bunch of different uses for that. And at the end, one of the things, how do you find a use for these spaces that generates anywhere near the revenue that retail used to? Retail on a revenue per square foot basis, as most of us are aware, could generate a high number of dollars to afford the upkeep for these types of buildings. And going forward, there's a lot of businesses that we can put in these things, but they can't afford the upkeep of the building or the maintenance of the building. And so finding a way to dice these buildings up and to have architectural or engineering people come in and find a better use for this, I really think that's the future you're looking at. Beyond that, we will continue to find a way to adapt and reuse. And to back up to something I said earlier, and Lisa, you and I were talking about this a little bit at the beginning, is one thing that a community looking forward is going to need is they're going to need space, they're going to need water, and then they can be attractive to companies. And, you know, a lot of companies the last 10, 15 years, I've worked a lot with the chambers, with the economic development folks. Some of the big things they've wanted, look where Amazon put the new Amazon Center up in the New York, New Jersey area. They wanted to be in these large areas. They wanted to be contiguous to a lot of culture and different things. And I personally think many companies are going to start relooking at that. They're going to start looking at the transportation hub. And in places like Shreveport Bossier, projects we've worked on for a long, long time, like 49 and 20, the 69 corridor. Do you have the infrastructure? Bossier City has put a lot of money into infrastructure and growing its infrastructure and roads. And places that have the infrastructure in place and that can commit to low cost of living for the employees, still a high quality of living for the employees, but that low cost of running their business could be very attractive going forward. And so I'll just throw that out, you know, what's out there. I don't think we're going to see any savior coming in like a General Motors or another casino. And so if we have large spaces that are out there, we may need to be looking at adaptive reuse. One of the places I would look at that has done a decent job of that, and I think many here know it, is the Alexandria area. They lost their air base a number of years ago, England Air Force Base, and that community over a long period of time has said, what I think the most important decision was give us control of that asset. And so I think as the business community starts to look down the stream, one of the keys that you want is for someone locally to have control of that asset, someone that you can work with, or whether that's a realtor representing them or a business that's still here or a contact. What you don't want is to have a building that just gets locked up and no one can talk to you about the building for a long, long time. That will disincentivize investment not only in that facility but around that facility. And I didn't have the slide here. I should have put it up. But the other thing people really like, and I want to commend Bossier, and I'll close with this, is people like unique spaces. And so places like downtown Bossier, places like some of the things Strack is doing in Shreveport, the more you can make your place unique, the more you can look at adapting your existing buildings and bringing in unique things. That's what they think people are looking for in the future. And with that, Lisa, I'll defer back to you, answer questions, talk with you, do whatever you want to do. I don't know if that's what you kind of wanted me to do, but that's kind of how we see the real estate market. It's strong right now. Northwest Louisiana has been good. We don't see it slowing down. We have 900 closings in the pipeline. People are still moving here. And with everything going on, tertiary cities may suddenly be a lot more attractive to people than they were 4 months ago.
Well, Scott, I thank you so very much. I don't have any, well, I do have a question in the chat box, but, you know, I'm curious to know, and you may or may not have this answer, or it'll be your members that would have this answer, is that you had made the statement of 900 pending contracts at the end of May. Do you think that maybe any of that is COVID related, that even in our own homes that we might be downsizing as we're seeing some of these big box companies also, you know, learning to live a little leaner, work leaner and more efficiently. So have you heard anything about that, or do you just really think it's people moving around in the same type of positive manner they have?
Well, I think it's two things. As I've talked to some of my brokers, and again, I'm not in the street selling property, so I'm just going on what the brokers I talk to tell me.
Sure.
Obviously, number one is interest rates. Anytime that you have interest rates at 3%, 2.5 for a 15-year, it's like stealing. And so but remember, when we say a closing, we're not talking a refinance. We're talking somebody moved a house, okay? And so with interest rates being so low, many of us look at it and say, oh, I want to buy this house, or I'm worried I want a house that's X amount of dollars. What a lot of people in the market do is they look at what they can afford for their house note. And so if they could afford before, and I'll make numbers up, if they could afford, you know, a house note of $2 before, well, now that $2 is buying them a lot more house at 2% interest or 3% interest. So I think you have some people who had not refied or had moved, and this is their chance to buy that bigger house. We have heard that being locked up in your house for 30, 60, 90 days has made a lot of people look around their house and say, maybe this is not where I want to spend the next 30 years. Maybe the time has come for me to get a different house that has the things I need, like a home office, or that I talked about the castling up of America. That's what I think we're really seeing. And when I look at what Bossier has to offer, a lot of, especially the newer construction in Bossier, people are moving to areas where they're getting that outdoor living space. They're getting the pool. They're getting more space. And then on the other end, where you and I may be more these days, Lisa, people are getting where their kids are leaving, or now they have grandkids. And so they're in the downsizing mode. And so they're getting rid of the big house, giving it for somebody else, and they're moving to a lot of the patio homes or the smaller places that people have lived. But it is people moving one way or another. Just as an aside on this topic, I was talking to a guy who is a deputy at the Caddo courthouse, and he told me that they have been surprised at the courthouse with the number of marriages. That a lot of folks who've been cohabitating together for a long time have suddenly decided, hey, we're stuck together, might as well get married. So there's been some good outcome of this. I think it'll be interesting for demographers like Elliot Stone-Cipher and others who do an excellent job to start looking at the birth rates 9 months from now. We'll see if this really had sort of that type of a pandemic growth rate for us in that term. But people definitely have looked around their house and said, I think I need a little more space.
Yes, I tend to agree with you. And as those children are born in the future, we're going to have a childcare issues. So it's, you know, it's all relative, and it's all a domino effect for sure. Well, it's really exciting, Scott, to see those numbers, and especially for Bossier Parish. Thank you for breaking those out with our average at about a 250,000 to 220,000 compared to the region at 185. So that's exciting for us. I think that has a lot to do with us being the home to Barksdale Air Force Base, and right here in Bossier Parish, as well as having the National Cyber Research Park and their anchor tenant GDIT, and their continued growth that we're seeing out there as things continue to come out there. And we've got in the future the groundbreaking of the Louisiana Tech Research Institute, and we talked to some of our officials on our board that work with Barksdale very closely, and PCS season is coming up, and you know they've been on restrictions, and so now they're getting ready to start moving again, and so we're really going to see those folks starting to move in and out, and you know, and we're quite used to that, and we love seeing our new families, and then we love seeing our families that have been here before to come back. Can you give us on the commercial side? I know you say it's a little hard to predict some of those because there's so many are privatized and what have you, but can you, the big elephant, if you will, in the room is obviously the Diamond Jacks facility. And I don't mean to just spring something on you, but that's one of our questions in the chat box. Any ideas, thoughts, anything that you're hearing on the street about that facility? Last thing we need is an empty building sitting over there at our entertainment district.
Well, the Diamond Jack, I'm happy to address that. The Diamond Jacks facility in many ways is going to be a challenge. The Diamond Jacks facility for Bossier becomes the Shumpert Medical Center for Shreveport. What do you do with a structure that was designed for use A that's now sitting not only empty, but also in a prominent location within your city? It's kind of hard to miss it. I haven't given Diamond Jacks a whole lot of thought. If I look at it from a real estate perspective, really some of the two best assets, well, it has three great assets. It has land and location. There's a lot of land there, and it's at a premium location. It's right on the river. It's right off the interstate. So it's very convenient. It's very high profile. As I look at it, and again, I'm not a real estate person. I'm not a developer. I'm giving you Scott Hughes' opinion. But the two most valuable pieces there might be the parking lot and the hotel, because the hotel very easily could be adapted to some sort of housing. you know, maybe not the one bedrooms that were there for the hotel, but you start knocking out a wall or two and you can start to create some nice spaces. And if you think about where the hotel's situated and the views it has up and down the river, that could offer somebody an opportunity to come in there and do some residential, a lot like they're doing in downtown Shreveport with some of the old high-rise buildings, coming in and doing some loft apartments and kind of things. But the hotel building, that could potentially be something that could reinvest. Parking lots are hard and expensive to build. You've got a great one sitting there in terms of housing. The other buildings, the boat itself, I guess, will be gone. I'm not up in the deal. But if you look at the rest of the building, what you effectively have is just a big lobby. You have a big pavilion. It's got some restaurants. It's got some things in there. But if someone could make use of that hotel side of the building, which also has some tremendous banquet facilities and expo hall, you know, kind of stuff down there, that would be the best use I could see of that at this point. Other than that, it's going to be kind of a stretch to look at something. You always hear some other uses of those types of properties. I don't think it would lend itself to medical very well. I don't think it would lend itself to, I hate to even say the word, but corrections. You'll hear that a lot. Group home kind of thing, but I would see that much as a potential of a high-rise residential.
Well, thank you for your insight to that. And of course, I mean, we've not heard officially from the Diamond Jacks and their parent company as to what do they plan on doing with the building. So it's still very hypothetical right now and up in the air as to what's going on. But, you know, that's how we work around here in Bossier and Shreveport, is that we're forward thinkers, and we're always working on the what ifs so that we're ready and prepared to move forward. So appreciate your insight to that. So are there any other questions out there, Jessica? Or I think our callers are not muted. So if our callers that are on the telephone would like to ask a question, you're more than welcome to at this time. You're muted, Jessica. Okay. Well, Scott, you know, this has been very interesting. And, you know, I think sometimes we forget when we're buying our homes that, you know, it's just another thing that we do. It's part of life. You buy a home and, you know, and you raise your children and then you downsize and what have you. But it really does have a direct correlation with the business community and the economy. And as businesses are moving in, and just as we talked about early on in the conversation while we were waiting for folks to call in, we know from a chamber perspective that as the COVID epidemic has really put a focus on at-home work and school work and telehealth, that the broadband is very, very critical, and that's all within our home environment. And so we are all working collectively together with all of our regional partners to improve our broadband access. What can we do? It's not going to happen overnight, but we'll take as many opportunities as we can, as quickly as we can. There's a very large grant that is coming down to the state of Louisiana, and that grant for broadband throughout the state is happening. I believe it's in the month of October. There have been 180,000 homes that have been identified as underserved. And so that is going to help in those areas. So it's, we understand for our internet and broadband and fiber companies that it's a business decision for them as well. But when we can all get on the same page, then we all rise to the top. And I think that's what we're doing together. So again, Scott, thank you for sharing. You know, a reminder of how the economy and residential areas do change over time, over the decades, and how it does shape our communities and how it relates to our business community. So we look forward to these continued good numbers and our future. So Scott, I'll give you the last word.
I just want to say thank you. We've had a long relationship with all the chambers at the Realtor Association. We're always happy to work with our chamber partners, and we do have almost 1,300 realtors in the Northwest area. So if anything I said encourages you, makes you upset, gets you curious, the best thing you can do is contact one of our members. They are experts in the areas they do practice, and we do have, I don't want to overspeak on commercial, we do have over 100 commercial realtors. And commercial has always been more of a, quote, insider's game because things are generally off market. So if you really have some issues with commercial property, give me a call. We can put you in touch with numerous commercial realtors. They know that market much more. But I think when you look at the numbers, particularly from March, April, and May, and we're already seeing our June numbers, we are very pleased that we think we're going to see a swoop recovery. And that one thing about Shreveport-Bossier, that the economy here never really leads the nation, but we also, on the good side, don't necessarily get wiped out when other people do too. So we think that we're very well situated here in this community with reasonable housing, with nice housing, with quality of life, and that there's no reason the Shreveport-Bossier economy can't get back to where it was in January of this year and even continue to grow. And we thank you for everything you and your board do to support Bossier. And I didn't even mention it once, but we were very excited with the new gate at Barksdale, and we think that's just going to open up another whole area of land and expansion. And I personally think the biggest challenge we're going to have in Bossier Parish at some point is determining where Bossier City stops and Houghton and Benton start. Those city line fights are coming up, but that's a good problem. We don't really decide where the city limits is. Our people will sell property everywhere, but we think that it's good that those three cities are growing together.
And that we are. And so we thank you again for your partnership and all the associations that work with us. And so if any of your members need any assistance from the Bossier Chamber and our leadership as well, please do not hesitate to call us. And again, we thank you all for joining us today. And we will get this webinar posted on our YouTube channel. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call. Have a great day. Thank you.